Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode is probably one of the more important ones we've gotten so far because this episode finally reveals what happened to the original kids from Mystery Incorporated, from the original Mystery Incorporated. It explains. This episode sets up what happened to them and why they're no longer around, and it implies that they didn't really, and it's heavily implied that they didn't really disappear because we've already established that 3 of the 5 are currently still hanging around Crystal Cove. But this episode explains in further detail what actually happened to them. So yeah, and this episode actually begins by showing us the original Mystery Incorporated. It shows what 3 of the characters we already know exist as part of Mystery Incorporated. We see Cassidy, a younger Cassidy Williams, a younger Mr. E, who by that point was going by Ricky Owens, and of course Professor Pericles, but before he had a disfiguring scar across his face. So yeah, all 3 of them are just the same characters but younger. But then we also meet Brad and Judy, who we haven't technically met before, and we don't really know what their story is. We know they exist in the background of the series, but we haven't seen them yet. This is the closest we've come to actually seeing them, and they appear in a flashback. So I'm kind of on the fence of whether or not I should picture them. I probably will, but yeah, we do finally meet a much younger Brad and Judy, and in any case, what they're actually doing is they're actually investigating an old church, and the reason they're going into the old church is because Brad, their leader, actually noticed that. Actually, says he kept noticing somebody coming and going. That the rest of the group remarks didn't look quite human, and also noted it had very large horns on its face. Which, yeah, but in any case, they're investigating the church. They're investigating the church when Professor Pericles suddenly hears something and goes to fly off, and with Ricky then proceeding to immediately start chasing after him, trying to get closer trying to get back to him and asking him to come back, and in the process he actually starts climbing onto the organ, which actually winds up making a very unpleasant sound because he winds up stepping on the keys. But he tries to climb up the organ, to get back to Professor Pericles, but in the process, he accidentally knocks it over and has to hide inside the organ to protect himself from the falling organ pipes. But what they actually find out is an old document that's actually hiding inside. And then Professor Pericles then comes back, remarking that it was just a false alarm and that it was just a possum, which he then remarks that he ate. But when he comes back, he notices the document that the group has found, and when the group unfurls it, they discover the Planispheric Disc, which notably is a complete set of the pieces. It's notably all 6 of the pieces put together, and the group and Mystery Inc. and the original Mystery Inc. has really no idea what it's supposed to be, but they remark that it's whatever it is, it's very important, and they'll have to definitely look into it a little bit more. And of course they then proceed to leave, unaware that they're actually being watched by some horned figure whose name we don't actually learn until the very end of the episode. But he is a very important character and seemingly the overarching antagonist of the first season, I should mention, because he winds up being a very, very important to the central mystery of the story. So yeah, in any case, it then cuts back to the present day where Scooby and Shaggy are currently sticking up Angel Dynamite's kitchen, and she's not particularly happy about that. And sure enough, they're just kind of mixing a whole bunch of other things into the pot, and she's not exactly sure if it could be qualified as food. And even remarks that if something alive climbs out of the pot, that she will not be hesitating to lay a fistful of smackdown on it, and proceeds to walk off. And then she then goes to go meet Velma, who is currently studying her piece of the Planispheric Disc and is trying to figure out the mysteries behind it. And what we find out is that apparently Velma is having a very rough time of it because she can't actually decipher some of the strange markings on it, and also by saying that she's Cassidy Williams without saying she's Cassidy Williams, she asked Angel if she's able to actually help, since she obviously since obviously she was a member of the original Mystery Incorporated and would know about this kind of stuff, but she merely remarks that she wishes she could help, but she can't. But it then cuts to outside where there's actually a trailer parked outside, presumably where Cassidy actually lives and sleeps. It hasn't been pictured in the previous episode, but it's clear. I think it's been there a while. I have no idea. But in any case, Fred is currently sorting through all of his trap making materials, while Daphne's kind of gushing about their engagement a little bit, and she even remarks that she hopes one day she'll actually be able to. They'll one day be able to actually have a very good engagement, pointing out that in a couple of months, they're going to be officially engaged because they're waiting until after graduation. But, she's just kind of very happy about it, but also points out that she hopes it'll actually go well, considering the fact that her family apparently has had a very weird history of weird engagements, including one particular sister who decided to spell her name out in chickens, but she couldn't get the chickens to actually do it correctly, and wound up misspelling her name, even though Daphne points out that it isn't particularly hard to train chickens to do that. But and even points out that all you really need is some feet and an electric fence, which kind of accurate. But of course she then notices that Fred isn't particularly listening to her, and she even calls him out on it, and he does point out that he wasn't listening, but he also points out that the reason he wasn't listening is because he keeps having his trap stuff moved, and he's kind of annoyed by it. So in order to just kind of make sure that none of his stuff goes missing, he's actually installed an app on his phone, which he calls a smartphone, even though it doesn't look like a smartphone, and it looks like an old flip phone. It doesn't look anything like a smartphone of today. It doesn't look like one of these. No, it's one of those oldie flip phones that shouldn't be able to install applications, and yet it does. I mean, I get it. It's implied that this is set during the 80s and 90s, but they still use modern day terminology, which does kind of make it a little bit weird. But in any case, Fred then remarks that he is actually, in any case, sidetracking a little bit. Fred reveals that he actually had wind up installing an app on his phone that'll let him know when some of his mystery machine trapping stuff has been moved or gone missing. And sure enough, to demonstrate the fact, he then proceeds to pick up a coil of rope and place it on top of another coil of rope in a different box, which then causes his phone to make bodily function sounds. Basically, it just makes burping, farting sounds, and a whole bunch of other things that just cause Daphne to roll her eyes a little bit. But in case immediately following that, Scooby and Shaggy then proceed to come out with a pile of what is apparently supposed to be breakfast, but they just come out with a huge pile of indistinguishable mystery meat, we'll call it. And it's just and they just bring it out with alongside a jar of hot sauce, which Velma actually calls out the name of, pointing out that she's calling it a cabeza fuego, I think. And of course Scooby remarks that it's Spanish for hothead, which she knows full well because she's an intellectual, but then finally realizes something and runs into the RV. And of course nobody fully understands why she's just suddenly up and left. And Scooby and Shaggy remark that it was probably because of the food, even though they openly remark that she hasn't even tasted the food yet, so how she can think it's terrible. But in case she then proceeds to come back with a piece of the Planet Spirit disc, it's revealed that she was actually conducting her experiment inside the RV. But she then pulls it out and reveals that she actually had that the reason she couldn't actually read any of the symbols on her Planet Spirit disc piece is because it was backwards and also in Spanish. And sure enough, she puts it in the rear view mirror of the RV to show that that is actually a Spanish word for fire. And Fred realizing that they actually have a couple of things regarding conquistadors in their old chest of stuff, then proceeds to point out that obviously that there's actually a very good possibility that they could find something to translate that in there. And sure enough, they then proceed to start poking. They then proceed to open the chest, but only to discover a note from Mr. E, and also note that the box is apparently empty. But Yeah, they then proceed to scoop up the. They then proceed to scoop up the They then proceed to scoop up the note and open it, which reveals that he just left the voice recording on the note and tells them that if they want to actually figure out the solution to their current mystery, that they'll have to, in Mr. E's own words, start where the episode finish where the mystery began, and this causes them to realize that they actually need to figure out the origins of the Plant Spirit Disc. And Fred immediately decides to actually pile everybody into the mystery machine, remarking that there's one person they know who can actually help them. And sure enough, they immediately go to Darrow College to meet with Professor Hatecraft, who he comes back in this episode, but isn't particularly happy to see them. And there's a good reason for that, being that he's currently under a lot of stress and currently doesn't really fully and we do find out why, is that apparently he's just been had a lot on his plate lately, and has been trying to write some new novels, but has hit a bit of a writer's block, and we do find out a bit of reasoning behind that. But he actually points out that the dean has actually been telling him that he needs to start writing some new stories, and that of course he now needs to compete with another author who is also on campus now, called Regina Wentworth, who I should mention is a parody of the people of the, I don't know who actually wrote them, but it's her. But the point is, she is actually a parody. Her novels are actually a parody of the Twilight novels, which is really funny. But of course, what we find out is that Daphne is actually a very big fan of the novels, which are called Dusk in the story. But it's very funny that they just parody Twilight. I mean, I haven't really seen or watched Twilight all that much, but I've seen bits and pieces here or there. But it is just kind of funny. They just parody Twilight, and it is kind of amusing. I do kind of like that. But in case after pointing out that he actually has to get going, he then proceeds to scoop up all of his books that he's been writing, and H.P. Hatecraft just kind of walks out of the library where they're working, and with the rest of Mystery Inc. actually following him, and he then proceeds to further explain that because Regina Wentworth has actually started working on campus, he actually has to start writing. He's actually been trying to write teen romance vampire novels, which isn't his forte, and he openly admits that, and he admits that he has to now try and figure out a way to actually fit in and try and figure out what exactly teenagers like, but openly admits that because of that, but openly admits that because he doesn't know what teenagers like, he's having a bit of a roadblock, and that's why he's struggling a little bit. But in case, this is this point where Mystery Inc. actually decides to volunteer their help, pointing out that they can actually help them, with Shaggy adding a bit of a fourth wall joke about how they've been teenagers forever, which is a reference to the fact that they've been teenagers since the original inception of Scooby-Doo. Since the original inception of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? They have been mostly portrayed as teenagers. Sometimes they get older, sometimes they're adults, but most of the time they are teenagers, and that is the joke. But of course the gang then proceeds to point. But of course, H.P. Hatecraft then points out that he does very much thank their help and does agree to actually help them on the grounds that they help him write his novel, and is more than happy to have the help. But in any case, they then get ready to actually pile into the mystery machine, and then a new character comes and blows it up. So yeah, there's this, which of course causes everybody to become hysterical, but because obviously the mystery machine just, their main method of transportation and their most reliable method of transportation just blew up in front of them. But it's at this point where we're actually met with a kind of a ghost called Obliteratrix, which shows up and announces that she has one goal, which is to destroy Mystery Incorporated. And of course then proceeds to summon several weapons out of nowhere, and proceeds to start immediately attacking them. And of course nobody is fully understand why this person hates him so much, and doesn't fully understand where this Obliteratrix person actually came from. But they do point out that they have better things to worry about, and try and flee. And eventually H.P. Hatecraft points them to the direction of Electro Hall, pointing out that they can hide in there. And of course it works. But they also wind up walking in on Regina Wentworth's book signing, which doesn't make her or the Dean very happy. And of course, we actually meet the Dean and both the Dean and Regina Wentworth. And what we find out is that the Dean is visibly annoyed about the fact that H.P. Hatecraft had just kind of barged in on Regina's reading. But also, what we find out is that Regina apparently doesn't like Hatecraft very much. What we find out is that she constantly calls him a has-been author, doesn't like him in the slightest, and also insults him to his face, which is mean. Don't do that. But yeah, in any case with that, H.P. Hatecraft points out that he is obviously very scared about the fact that he could very much lose his job if he's not careful, because obviously, as he points out, the Dean was actually looking for something to actually fire him over and kick him out, and points out that this incident might just be it. But in any case, they don't. But in any case, and while Shaggy and Scooby do reassure him, they also point out that they also proceed to wonder, and also this is a recurring gag where nobody can actually say the Obliteratrix's name correctly. But they then wonder why the Obliteratrix is mad at them, and wonders why they would actually be after the Obliteratrix would actually be after them. But they then wonder maybe if it isn't about them, but rather what they had. And sure enough, they then point out that they probably have all the clues that they need to actually solve the mystery, and someone just doesn't want them to solve it. And sure enough, this is outright implied by Mr. E. We actually get a bit of a cutaway with him and Angel in his bunker alongside Ed Machine, and what we find out is that apparently he's monitoring the situation, and Cassidy isn't too happy about his kind of laissez-faire attitude toward monitoring it, and sure enough, he really just sends Ed to go monitor the whole situation and keep an eye on things, but for the most part, he doesn't really seem to care. But also points out that it could very well be an attack from Professor Pericles, and for the time being, just decides to sit back and watch, pointing out that if the gang's lives are in danger, they could be problematic. But yeah, of course, Angel does point this out as well, pointing out that obviously if Mr. E doesn't keep a better eye on the kids, they could possibly be killed by Obliteratrix. But and of course, Mr. E reassures them that he has everything under control, but also points out that she shouldn't underestimate him, pointing out that they're kind of in this together, because as we find out, he was the one who actually brought her back to Crystal Cove. So yeah, he kind of just pulled the strings to get her back in Crystal Cove, and that is kind of a very interesting thing. But in case with that, realizing that they now need to actually kind of split up and kind of divvy up the work. They actually sent Shaggy and Scooby actually go to actually help H.P. Hatecraft write his novels, which wind up being a really funny thing where they try to explain how to actually write all the different novels. And what we find out is that in order to get himself into the mindset of a teenage girl, he has actually just plastered posters of teenage girl stuff all over his house, and it is just a really funny juxtaposition. Just this big horror author who I should mention, when we previously saw his house, had actual sculptures of the monsters from his books in his house. Now just has big girly posters just hanging up all over all of the creepy horror stuff, and it's the funniest thing ever. But yeah, they're actually Shaggy and Scooby are actually the ones assigned to actually help H.P. Hatecraft with his new vampire novel. Meanwhile, Velma, Daphne, and Fred are actually in the museum area, actually in the museum investigating what's actually going on with the Plant Spirit disc, and they decide to look for anything regarding Spanish stuff. So she actually winds up splitting the two. They actually wind up splitting up the work with Velma volunteering to actually go look into that kind of stuff. Daphne goes to do another thing, and when she actually goes to assign Fred his own task, Daphne just swoops in and scoops him up and points out that they'll actually be able to discuss, that she actually wants to be able to discuss some stuff with him, which she does point out does make him a little bit happy, and he does have some ideas that he's been trying to shoot around. So of course, so of course the two of them walk off, all lovey-dovey, while Velma's just kind of left alone, visibly annoyed about that. But in cases at this point where they actually start talking about where Daphne and Fred actually start talking about their engagement, and what we find out is that Fred's entire idea is to just put everyone in a giant trap, which of course is just his whole thing. But and of course this actually winds up annoying Daphne a little bit, pointing out that she merely just wants to have a nice family brunch and just announce everything to everybody. And of course, that's the more sensible way to go. Of course, they're gonna go with that option. That's a much better idea. But in case Velma does eventually find what they're looking for, and also goes to get Daphne and Fred in the middle of that conversation, and points out that they seem to be working very hard, in a rather sarcastic tone, before escorting them all before bringing them all over to the table. And what we find out is that Velma has actually found all the information that she needs regarding the Planispheric Disc, which is that she apparently found an old book about how the conquistadors used to use it, about how Spanish conquistadors I can't speak of things that you can't spell that I can't pronounce correctly. Conquistadors, old Spanish conquistadors used to use the Planispheric Disc to map out and hide their treasure, and just kind of use that as a way to find it. And of course, what we find out is that they actually used to hold it. They actually used to have pieces of it, and of course they actually have a full picture of the full Planispheric Disc put together. So yeah, which of course makes Mystery Incorporated realize they're actually on the right track. But then they actually hear various bodily sounds coming from Fred's general direction, and of course the two girls are absolutely repulsed by the fact that he just made a bunch of gross noises next to him. But he then points out that it wasn't him, and that it was the noise that his trap reader actually makes, and then realizes that the only way that's happening is if the mystery machine wasn't actually destroyed. And quickly realizing that they need a ride, they call up Shaggy and Scooby and HB Hatecraft, who show up in a van decked out in dusk novel gear, which is just really funny. And of course he then proceeds to point out that he could very well lose his job for that. Hatecraft points out that he could very well lose his job for that, of course, because he's stealing school property. That's a very big no-no. But yeah, in any case, they then proceed to pile into the Duskmobile, and they then proceed to follow the signal on Fred's app on his mobile phone, until they eventually come to an old train yard, which they then point out and they eventually start poking around trying to figure out where the mystery machine is, and eventually they follow the signal to what seems to be a train car. But they then get but then upon closer inspection, it's revealed to actually just be a curtain painted like a train car, and that the mystery machine is just hiding behind it. And of course, nobody has any idea what exactly is going on with that. But wonder why, and actually wonder why it is exactly that the mystery machine is just here. But then it's revealed that it was to actually lure them into a trap. And sure enough, Obliteratrix shows up again with more weapons and declares that she's going to destroy Mystery Incorporated, and that this is the end of the mystery for them. And of course, Shaggy also comments about the fact that she seems to be pulling weapons out of nowhere, because that costume literally has no pockets, as he points out. But in case then what then results is a chase sequence where Obliteratrix starts storing weapons around and starts trying to blow them up and trying to destroy them. And of course, eventually they all tuck inside a giant train car. And it's at this point where they realize that they actually start spitballing ideas, with Fred pointing out that he needs to get back to the mystery machine so he can set a trap so they can actually capture. While HB Hatecraft actually winds up setting up a storyline of setting up who he thinks is actually the person behind the mask, and points out that that Obliteratrix is actually in great shape, just like Regina is. Which and of course HB Hatecraft is coming from a bit of a biased perspective, because obviously he and Regina don't like each other. But they do point out that that's a very real possibility, and they can't rule it out if the person is indeed after a Hatecraft. And but in any case, with that, Fred realizes that he now need to actually set some traps, and And then ducking and weaving past Obliteratrix's assault, he then eventually manages to scoop up some of his trapping gear from the back of the mystery machine, and then proceeds to actually set a trap for them while the rest of the gang actually keeps her distracted. And they do eventually succeed because by actually using a cutout of one of the Dust novel's lead characters, which Daphne admittedly has a bit of a crush on, as she points out, and also wonders what Fred would look like if he looked exactly like that, if he had the complexion of boiled meat, as she puts it. But yeah, they then use the cutout to actually lower Obliteratrix into a trap, so that Frank can actually trap her using a giant spring trap, and it does wind up working. It does wind up hitting her. And they then proceed to gather around and wonder who they've unmasked, only for her to suddenly disappear and run off. And of course, this winds up being on the evening news because of this, because there was just a big explosion at Old Train Yard. Of course, that's going to be on the news. But of course, the Dean is obviously furious about the fact that Hatecraft not only stole a van from their university, but also that they just stole one, that he just kind of did so without permission, and also has just been doing a bunch of other things that he shouldn't be doing. And of course, she then takes this opportunity to finally fire him and kick him out of the university, saying that he needs to clean up his desk by the end of clean up his office by the end of the week, and then he's out. And then Regina Wentworth is also there as well, and she kind of just once again insults Hatecraft to his face and sarcastically remarks that he should have the best with his career, and proceeds to walk off, calling him a has-been actor. And of course, this causes Hatecraft to become completely heartbroken because he just lost his job. And the rest of the group then proceeds to actually console him, and proceeds to point out that now that they have their chest full of stuff back, they point out that they absolutely now have to solve the mystery, and to both get HB Hatecraft's job back and also figure out why Obliteratrix is attacking them. And of course they then proceed, since they no longer have the museum, since they no longer have the library at Darrow University, then decide to actually go to the Crystal Cove Museum instead, to the Crystal Cove Library instead, and start unboxing some of their stuff. But note that they are having a hard time finding some stuff, and the only thing they can really find is a couple of conquistador books. But eventually, HB Hatecraft actually does indeed find something that he remarks he notices. He doesn't really fully understand what he's reading, but he notes that it seems to be saying something about praying and colored glass, which causes everybody to become a little bit confused. But then Velma actually puts two and two together and realizes that it's probably talking about stained glass. And of course, this is a conquistador book. The gang then puts two and two together and realize that it's most likely referring to an old Spanish church that is inside Crystal Cove. And they even point out that seems to be most likely, considering that Professor Pericles, that was one of the locations he visited when he actually helped with the Aphrodite mystery. And realizing that's a good a place as any to start, they then proceed to go to the old Spanish church and proceed to start poking around. Shaggy and Scooby immediately walk into a confessional booth and get attacked by possums, that was just a foreshadowing when Professor Pericles said that at the start of the episode. That was foreshadowing about the fact that of course everything is very in trouble. And also very dangerous, and they can just get attacked by possums. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, they get attacked by possums, and the rest of Mystery Inc. then proceed to start poking around a little bit and trying to figure out what they're doing. And of course they haven't really found anything. They notice, but eventually Daphne does indeed find something hidden underneath one of the tiles in the old Spanish church, and then proceeds to actually pick apart the tile and discovers another locket similar to the one she found in the Crystal Cove caves. And after calling the rest of the gang over, they then notice that it is indeed the same locket. But then Shaggy and Scooby barge out, trying to fend off the possums, which causes everyone to become a little bit spooked. But in the process, Fred accidentally steps on a hidden button, which opens the large central relief in the middle of the floor, which as the gang quickly finds out, seems to go to the very bottom of to the very caves underneath Crystal Cove. And yeah, what Fred remarks is that apparently nobody has been down there in years and wonders if anybody knows that it exists. But then Obliteratrix shows up and says that no, nobody does know it exists, and she's going to make sure it stays that way because the secret is going to die with them. At which point she then proceeds to show up and traps the several members of Mystery Inc. in nets. She then proceeds to just trap Fred and Daphne in one net, Shaggy and Velma in another, and Scooby is just kind of lassoed up and thrown out into the wall. At which point Hatecraft decides to actually confront who he believes is Regina, and decides to attack her, pointing out that while she can attack him and make fun of his books and a whole bunch of other things, she's not going to mess with his friends. And then rather pathetically tries to attack her, but and obviously he gets his ass kicked. But of course it's at this point where she then remarks where she was previously, and proceeds to go back to her assault on Mystery Inc. But then Angel Dynamite shows up and kind of saves the kids. She shows up, and because of that, she's more than a match against Obliteratrix, who really can't fight back again against Angel Dynamite, and eventually has to resort to some of her bombs to chase Regina off, or rather to chase Cassidy off, and of course Angel then proceeds to fall into the hole in the middle of the church, with Obliteratrix going to check on her to see if she's really dead, but then of course Angel then proceeds to throw one of her razor sharp CDs, which she's established to have at this point, and it proceeds to cut one of the chandeliers above Obliteratrix's head, which winds up trapping her in a cage, and of course after finally freeing the rest of Mystery Incorporated, the gang then proceeds to actually confront Obliteratrix to see who she is, and of course HP Hatecraft thinks it's Regina, and of course it's not, but who it actually winds up being is Alice May, much to everybody's confusion, and of course they do point out the very obvious thing about how she used about how her backstory was that she was trying to avenge her father, the Creeper, and also point out that she should be in jail right now. And of course, she then proceeds to clarify why she's no longer in jail and why she attacked them as Obliteratrix. As we find out, Mystery was the one who actually hired her and not Pericles. And this is implied with Pericles, with a little cutaway from Pericles earlier, which I didn't mention, but basically, long story short, Mr. E freed her from prison and then hired her to create a fake assassination attempt on Mystery Incorporated to draw Professor Pericles out of hiding, considering Professor Pericles currently needs them alive, and if he thought that they were actually in danger, he would obviously come out of hiding and try to protect them. And of course, this would also serve as a double motive where Professor Pericles currently has 2 pieces of the plastic disc, and that would enable Mr. E to go and get it. So, yeah, because of that, because of that, they would actually have been able to actually get 3 pieces of the plastic disc and swipe them away from Pericles. So, basically, Mr. E it's been established that Mr. E doesn't really have the squeakiest of clean hands, but this episode outright confirms it. He's willing to just make a fake assassination attempt on Mystery Inc.'s lives to just kind of kill them, and of course this winds up working, and this winds up working as Professor Pericles does ultimately kind of decide to come out of hiding. But with that, Sheriff Stone then proceeds to arrest Alice May, although he openly admits that he didn't realize that she had actually escaped, and kind of makes an implication that he's not going to make that same mistake again, and before driving off. And it's at this point where Mr. Inc. then proceeds to thank Cassidy for her help, but then wonder how she actually knew where they were, and it's at this point where Velma tells her that she can't keeping her secret, and sure enough, she then finally reveals her real name to the rest of Mystery Inc. and then proceeds to explain what actually happened to the original Mystery Incorporated. And what we find out is that they actually didn't. Of course, what we find out is that they actually didn't. Is that Mystery Inc. apparently did, and this has been implied, but Mystery Inc. apparently didn't disappear. They were chased out of Crystal Cove, and what she explains is that there was actually a monster called the Freak at Crystal Cove, which we saw at the top of the episode, but gets name dropped here, and she explained that Ricky had actually that the rest of the Brad and the rest of the gang were investigating the old Spanish church when they were and actually found the document detailing the plastic disc, but they were then but then the freaky Crystal Cove found out what they were doing and proceeded to actually confront them in the caves underneath the Crystal Cove and threaten their various families with legal issues if they actually decide to pursue them further. So yeah, the freak of Crystal Cove just kind of chased them out of town and forced them to go into hiding. They had really no choice. So, and of course, now that they know the truth, she then points out that of course now they know the full truth behind what happened to Mystery Inc. But to original Mystery Inc. I should mention. But now points out that they actually need to make a choice, and urges them to actually give up their piece of the Planet Spirit disc willingly. Because obviously it's not worth risking their lives, and points out that they need to be safe. But Fred is understandably upset about the fact that she lied to them from the very beginning, and then he and the rest of the gang then proceed to pile into the mystery machine with him pointing out that they're going to solve the mystery to as much of an extent as they can, and proceeds to point out that the mystery isn't over until they say it's over. But Cassidy then proceeds to point out that they don't understand. And as they're leaving, she hollers after them that the freak that threatened them is still very much out there. And sure enough, we find out that she's not lying, because standing on top of the ruined Spanish church is the freak of Crystal Cove in the present day, who then proceeds to point out that the curse has been unleashed, but soon the secret will die with him. And he then chuckles sinisterly while raising a scimitar over his head. And yeah, that's where the episode ends. So, yeah, this episode sets him up as the final antagonist of the season, and that's going to be interesting. But, yeah, this episode has a lot of revelations, namely that, first and foremost, this episode reveals what finally happened to the original Mystery Incorporated kids. That has been a big thing that has finally happened in this episode. But, yeah, more to the point, we find out that Professor Perk, that apparently there's just been a big battle over the pieces of the Planet Spirit disc, and the original Mystery Incorporated kids were the first people to start investigating into those. They actually started investigating into those and started looking for the pieces, and started poking around trying to find the other pieces, but they didn't find any. And yeah, this episode just kind of confirms that is indeed a thing that's going to happen now. Of course, now we know that the freak of Crystal Cove is a thing, and he doesn't want the pieces being assembled. So, and actually threatened the original Mystery Incorporated and kicked them out of Crystal Cove by threatening legal action against their parents, which, of course, forced them into hiding, and that is a very big thing that happened. But, yeah, in any case, I'm interested to see what the freak of Crystal Cove's backstory is and why he's threatening Mystery Incorporated, and specifically the new Mystery Incorporated, because he seems like he's going to be coming after them now. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what that little story is going to lead. But for right now, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks out of my way saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video I recommend to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. Else next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!